On this video, we're checking out another round of really insane horror movies, and I figured what saner way to watch a batch of nutty movies like this than kicking back in a hot tub in the middle of the desert. Yes, I figured, why not? Let's be very calm and relaxed. But then for the movies, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Number 10. We're starting this one with the entire reason that I wanted to make another list of insane horror, and that's because I saw Spaghetti from 2023. So it starts with a woman having a bad dream, and then a title sequence made with AI that just does not look great. And I guess they went this route because it was cheaper, but it looks like AI nonsense. Okay, so we're in LA, and Lena here gets a flat tire on her way to work. And a fancy blue car pulls up behind her, and a guy gets out, and the pair exchange extremely awkward dialogue where he tells her that he can give her a lift, and she starts recording him.
You seem very
I seem very what?
Very stressed.
Oh my God, okay.
You just need to relax. Let me help you with your tire.
What are you, the Black James Bond?
But I think we're supposed to think that she's being rude, but a random guy pulls up to an attractive woman he's never met and is like, sure, get in my car. I can give you a ride. What do you have to lose? And that part was written by a dude. And she ends up taking the ride with him, but for some reason, he has to make a stop first because, get this, he's a rich guy with a fancy blue convertible, and he's stopping at a school to make a presentation to special needs kids. And oh my God, I mean, this is by the Birdemic guy, isn't it? It's not? Fooled me. He then gives his speech, which is literally 1 minute long. For real, there's not an insinuation that it's a longer speech and the time is elapsed. He just gives a 1 minute speech that says, we can do anything if we put our mind to it, and then he's out. So, wow, man, an inspiring speech.
We can do anything we set our minds to do, right?
Yes!
Yes!
Lena then gets picked up by her brother, and I don't know, why couldn't he pick her up at her car? But then Lena gets to her job, the job she's done up like this to get to, and she's a nurse. Because, this is how nurses dress to go to work, right? But then Scotty fixes her car and drops it off at her house, and she's like, wait, how does he know where I lived? And her friend says, oh, you must have had your registration in the glove box. And no one is like, that's super duper creepy. So let's look into getting a restraining order. But no, she wants to meet up with him. Her friend has a very attentive man.
We'll just clean it up. It's only coffee.
Mind your business, bitch.
Okay, Don.
And her and Scott start to date, and they spend the night together, and right after, he starts giving some mixed signals. So she decides to seek out her voodoo friend to do a love spell, and meets this man with a super convincing accent.
Are you sure you want to do this? Because if you do, there is no turning back.
And look, I don't want to spoil anything about where this movie goes from here, because it's just so nuts. But let's just say that there's a reason why it's called Spaghetti, and I'm telling you, everything about this movie just feels wrong. It's weirdly staged, and every single dialogue interaction feels like something no human being would ever say. And I'm not joking about that Birdemic comparison. I was waiting for a scene of someone closing $1 million deal and a bunch of applauding, and you would think that this is from a first-time director, but no, it's from Adam Garash? I don't know. And he's made several decently budgeted pictures, including the Night of the Demons remake, which, yeah, I mean, it's not great, but it's not that bad. Not like this very weird and off-kilter movie. And this is about an hour and 20-minute movie. And I kid you not, at an hour into this thing, it just takes an extremely out of nowhere, completely random left turn and says, you know what? I think I want to be a different movie now. And it just does. On one of my other lists, I covered a movie called Rat Finka Boo Boo, where they were making a crime drama and then got bored halfway through and then switched and started making a superhero movie. This feels like that. And trust me, nothing I can say will prepare you for how bizarre that this movie is and feels. It apparently cost 200 grand, and that shocks me. I would have guessed 20 grand at most, and it's just insane. And it has a mid-credit scene to set up a sequel, and it makes absolutely no sense.
Listen, I just got my GED in prison, but I know that's bullshit.
Number 9. All right, buckle up because it's time to discuss 1998's Replicator. It kicks off with Brink Stevens as a scientist running a test on a soldier's libido, and it's meant to show exactly what arouses him on screen. And then there's another doc here, and it's Leatherface himself. He's being yelled at by a military man and working on something called the Replicator project with some other guys, and what it does is basically just teleport people, but it has an unintended side effect in that it transforms all of its subjects into hot women. There's another doctor on hand, and he's working on his own project, which is a mind control helmet. And the transform women are super horny. And what is this about again? Then it gets even weirder because they mention Brink's character again and her experiment, and then literally just show the opening scene again. They were like, this movie needs nudity and Brink Stevens in the first minute, or else we'll lose the audience, but we only have this limited footage, so I don't know, just put it at the beginning too. But then, here's where things get even more nuts. The people who go through the process then transform into alligator creatures and start killing. This is almost an hour into what has been so far been a sort of a silly sex comedy, and now we have gator heads. And this is by Brett McCormick, and he has a pretty limited run of films, but it started with the 1986 film The Abomination, which I actually featured on another volume of insane horror movies, and that one's super weird, but in a totally different way. And I guess this movie was thrown together. They had just filmed something called Time Tracers and had extra film and access to the sets, so they came up with this and shot it in 5 days. But then after, they figured that the movie was a little too short and needed some extra star power. So a year later, they shot the scenes with Brink and Gunner and stitched them in, which is why they don't interact with any other aspects of the movie.
Could go wrong.
Number 8. On the last run of Insane Horror, I talked about I bought a vampire motorcycle, so I thought it would be appropriate in this one to continue that theme and discuss 2007's Blood Car. It starts with a guy telling us that we're set in the near future and gas prices are so insanely high that no one drives cars anymore, and we meet school teacher Archie Andrews, no relation I assume, played by Mike Brune, who seems to have still done some acting but mainly moved into being a pre-established first assistant director on a number of big TV shows. He's a vegetarian and buys wheatgrass from my girl, and she has a crush on him, and he's trying to develop a new type of engine that operates on wheatgrass to solve the gas crisis. But one night, while working on it, he accidentally bleeds into it, and before you can say, "Feed me Seymour," it starts running. With a little bit of self-mutilation, he places the engine into his car and gets it up and running, gaining the attention of some government agents that have been watching him. He starts up a fling with a girl from the nearby meat stand who's interested in his car, but he runs out of blood too fast. So, Archie does what anyone would do. He installs a big sort of grinder in the trunk that feeds directly into the engine and begrudgingly compromises his beliefs by killing animals to make them fuel. Eventually, graduating to humans, of course. This leads to love triangles, government intrigue, and lots of murders. And this nugget of nuttiness is from Alex Orr, and it's his first feature, and he's only done one more film after this, but then went into producing and made a name for himself, producing a little number for Adult Swim called Too Many Cooks. And if you're not familiar with that, go look it up, because it's more insane than anything I'm going to show you on this list. He then went on to a number of things like producing Easy for Netflix and some of Creepshow and then Donald Glover's Atlanta. This movie did pretty well itself and won a number of festival awards, even though the reviews were a touch spotty. I think it's actually a pretty fun watch, even though it does get a little lost in itself for a while, but it finishes strong, and it's worth a watch.
You don't do this. Remember the f***ing oath. Oh, God damn it. Oh, not
Hey, right on time.
I'm always on time.
Number 7. I feel like insane movies go hand in hand with sleazy movies, and this one is both. And it's 1997's Schizophrenia, The Horror Mangler. It starts with a woman taking a shower, of course, and then laying around naked. And it's a fairly explicit sequence. But then a man comes into her house and strangles her to death. We're then introduced to Harry, who is a filmmaker and losing his grip on sanity, and a voiceover tells us that he's about to fall under sway of something called Rubberneck, which we very quickly discover is a puppet. He wanders around a bit and I assume ad-libs some stuff, including going through a drive-thru and freaking out on them. And if I had to guess, I would say that this was just done guerrilla style, and this is how he gets from place to place. He's hilariously super hyper and cranky and goes to visit his girlfriend, Coke. And seriously, this guy's reading of every single line is absolute gold. Someone told him to go over the top, and he not only did that, but he went over the top and then climbed back down again.
So tell me how you got him.
He knows you liked the movie. He wanted you to have it.
Yeah, what'd you have to give him? Head?
No.
Ass?
Rubberneck talks to Harry and tells him that he's brought him to life and tells him to kill, which he then does. And yeah, Harry never just walks anywhere. Which is amazing. And there's not much plot here. It's just Harry being a lunatic from scene to scene as he rants for a while, and then kills someone, and then rants some more, and it's just really weird. And it's directed by Ron Atkins. He did several oddball flicks, but this is weird. He did a film in 2011, and then I guess took a 12-year break, but came back last year with something called Christ Rising, which I can't tell if it's sincere or not, but from what I can tell, I think that it's actually a religious film, which would be a pretty big shift from what we're seeing here. Because this movie features lots of dark and disturbing stuff, and more than one scene of Harry dancing around completely nude. And I have to credit actor John Giancaspro here, because this dude just goes for it. And this was popular enough in the underground scene to get not one, but 2 sequels. The second one came out in 2003. It was called Necromaniac, Schizophrenia 2. And the third came 8 years later in 2011 and was called The Cuckoo Clocks of Hell. And this one is really wild because it's a crossover film that features a character called Terry Hawkins, who appeared in a 1977 film called The Last House on Dead End Street.
The bitch is dead. Ding dong, the bitch is dead. The bitch is dead. The bitch is dead.
Number 6. Well, if that film leaves you feeling like you need to take a shower afterwards, maybe this next one will not change that feeling at all, since we're going to discuss 2003's Monstered. Yes, I said Monstered. It has this oceanside town, and there's a plant called Dewtech nearby doing some sort of genetic experiments, and meanwhile, a prisoner named Jack Schmidt escapes prison at the same time that an experiment goes wrong, and they have to dispose of the polluted chemicals into the sewer. In his efforts to escape arrest, Jack ends up in a sewer pipe and covered in a toxic poo, which melts him down, and his name is Jack, and he ends up splashed in an accident with an experimental chemical, and he melts down and presumably merges with the things surrounding him. And this all sounds a bit familiar, so let's hope that there's no carrot rape incoming. Things get weird when there's a couple of police officers with a puppet, and puppets may be a theme here. And just as you were expecting, very soon a giant monster is rising up out of the toilets to attack. He starts killing people and leaving messages on the walls so they know who's doing the killing, and there's sort of a South Park parody on the TV, except their version swears, which I guess doesn't matter now that the actual South Park swears as well. But can they find him and flush him down before he stinks things up for everyone? And this is the first film from Rich Popko and Dan West, and they would team up later on one more movie after this called Retarded, about a zombie outbreak at a special education school. This one was shot over the course of 2 years, and it's hard not to compare this one to Jack Frost because it's essentially the same story structure. I mean, hell, it even begins with the framing device of an adult and a child, and the whole film being told as a story, and discovering that they can fight the villain with a common household object that dissolves it. And I have to say, for a movie that is just essentially one giant poop joke, there's less comedy in it than you would think. It's not that it takes itself completely seriously, because it doesn't, but I guess it's just not as funny as it thinks. And in terms of general insanity, the way it is told is pretty standard, but the strangeness of it all lands it pretty squarely on the overall concept.
Like a number 2 puppet, like on the TV Tubbies with the little gay guy?
Was it a big puppet? Was it a big number 2 puppet?
No, it was a doo-doo!
Number 5. We are going to shift gears here since the last 2 films were a touch on the lowbrow side, so let's class it up with 2013's Saint Bernard. And if you want weird, well, this is it. This is weird all wrapped up in a bow. We meet Bernard, and he's been obsessed with music since a young age, and there's some dreamlike sequences in which he's conducting orchestras for his friends, and pretty much every time we see him, he's wearing a white tuxedo. So he's at what appears to be a school and ends up walking through a series of discarded drug paraphernalia, and then is in a mortuary. And you see how I said this is surreal? It's more than that, and is bordering on stream of consciousness. At times he envisions himself as some sort of worm creature, and he finds a St. Bernard's head on the side of the road and puts it in a bag to carry around with him, which is, not healthy behavior. He goes to a church, and the priest is played by Bob Zmuda, and this man is the other half of legendary comedian Andy Kaufman, and he was his head writer, and also played in his stage shows as his alter ego Tony Clifton. He's also the founder of the American version of Comic Relief, the series of classic stand-up shows that benefited the homeless. But then there's just a chain of oddball scenes, like Bernard in a money suit getting picked clean by random people, except they're not that random, because for some reason this guy is Frank Henenlotter, and a fight between Lincoln, Jackson, and Franklin, and then people hanging wooden frames on him as he walks by, until a man with a chainsaw sets him free, and then for no reason at all, the damned. And then there's this guy, and I don't even know what to make of this guy, but he looks damn cool. And that's because the effects of this were done partially by Gabe Bartalos, legendary effects artist responsible for so many different things, not the least of which was designing the Leprechaun in the Leprechaun films. But he didn't just do the effects here, as this was also written and directed by Bartalos. It's his second feature after the way less weird, but still, weird, Skin Deep. And this one took years to make, and then years to get released. It danced around the underground circuit and festivals for 6 years after its premiere in 2013, and didn't get a formal release until 2019. And I can see why. It's not a film for everyone, and there's no real story to it. It's just a series of strange and surreal events that I find pretty damn interesting, if not exactly the most engaging, as there's not much to grab onto. But it's a cool, hypnotic ride with some amazing practical effects, a parachuting chicken, and an appearance by Warwick Davis himself.
Tick tock, 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 tick.
Number 4. Well, staying away from the lowbrow side of things is right out the window, because now we're going to take a peek at 2009's Terror at Bloodfart Lake. I said what I said. It's a Chris Seaver film, and it brings back a recurring character named Hambone, and thank goodness that they did away with this being a blackface character, even if he still talks in jive lingo. But he's then attacked by something from the lake, presumably the Bloodfart one. There's a bunch of young folk headed up to the woods, and there's another recurring Seaver character with Leo DeChamp.
I'm Leo DeChampa, and I'll blast ass if anyone tries to step on my toes. How about ya?
And he tells them that the lake is cursed by a boy named Jimmy, who was picked on and died there, and haunts the lake in a scarecrow outfit. And it's pretty goofy stuff.
What the f*** are those?
Oh, you mean my Popeye cows? I like to think of them as heaven's soldiers.
The group at the cabin start hanging out, and there's one named Ben, and he claims to be the owner of Fright Rags, and the guy who owns Fright Rags is named Ben, but this isn't him, so I guess it's just someone playing him. There's also an old-timey movie actress.
I am Gwendolyn Bouvier, Screen Star.
And Zeebs, who talks like Tony Danza and is wearing a Britney Fox t-shirt, so I'm assuming that he's got a long way to love, or else his baby broke all the rules, or any of the other random Britney Fox lyrics that are floating in my head way too frequently. Seriously, terrible band. I love them. And yeah, I said that this is from Chris Seaver, and I've covered a number of his films on my videos, and they're a very, very, very particular sense of humor, and they're also very, very dumb. But that said, I like them. I'm not one to just marathon them or anything, but I throw one on once in a while, and I have a good time. They're super low budget and very in humor.
Look out, Pie, what's going on? Man, now that's an extreme tune right there. Sometimes I think about Kent Winger covering that tune and I actually cry. I'm being dead ass serious here. I openly cry thinking about Winger and Nukem High.
Anyway, gang, ta-ta.
And it takes a while for anything horror-related to happen, and all the stuff until now is mostly silly comedy that's fairly random. But then Jimmy shows up and starts the murder. And yeah, it's pretty out there, but it's not surreal strangeness. It's just kind of randomness and silly, crass jokes. And some of Seaver's films aren't really my cup of tea, and they can be hit or miss, but I liked this one. And again, I like dumb stuff like a movie where a woman kills a man by shoving him entirely in her butt and then crapping out his skeleton. Number 3. Let's keep that brow super low and look at 2019's Down's Revenge, which starts with a warning screen. Uh-oh! And it tells us to stop bullying. And why do I have a feeling that they're not going to practice what they preach? And we start off with a young man named David, and I think, I'm not sure, but based on the title and how the other characters refer to him, I think he's meant to have Down syndrome. They take a class where they just talk about ghosts and whether they exist, and their science assignment is do a test to prove it. A couple of the kids are bullies, and they're pretty relentless with David, whose parents died when he was a little boy and was raised by his grandmother. One day, after being beaten pretty bad, he finds out that his grandmother died. And then John Savage shows up. John Savage from Hair, the deer hunter, the thin red line. That John Savage appears in Down's Revenge. Anyway, David gets kidnapped by the bully guys and locked in the trunk, but they crash into a lake and he drowns. 3 years pass and the main bully is now a rich hotshot, and yep, you guessed it, David's ghost is back and looking for revenge. David's friend Kim is now a cop and trying to bring him justice, but here's the thing, she was there. She knows how he died. The dick kids just threatened her into silence, but they never found David's body and never found the car. Like, just say where the car is. But yeah, for the most part, this is a very run-of-the-mill revenge flick. Kid gets bullied and killed and returns from the grave to get back at them. But it's about a guy with Down syndrome who clearly does not have Down syndrome. Like, if you didn't give this movie that title and you changed like 2 lines of dialogue, you just have David being a regular geeky and awkward kid. But no, they went with the whole Downs thing specifically to take advantage of that, and then they have the nerve to put this whole no bullying thing at the beginning of their movie. And for such a standard-looking movie, why have this on here? Because it's insane that they came up with this concept of a ghost of a man with Down syndrome and then marketed the whole film that way, and then not only did this standard narrative, but then they take themselves overly seriously. And then even sort of try to make the main bully kid sympathetic. And he's like, I did all these terrible things when I was a kid. And I'm like, hey movie, it was 3 years ago. And the terrible things included locking a kid with Down syndrome in the trunk of a car and letting him drown to death. So this one's insane for doing that. Number 2. This next one is one that got a bit more attention, so you may have either seen or heard of this one, and it's 2020's Fried Barry. It has this guy here named Barry, and he's a pretty down and out, and a deadbeat dad, and a junkie. One night after getting dosed, he's taken up in a beam by an alien ship where he's put through tests, including having an injection into his penis, which we're shown, by the way, so prepare yourself for that. And within the first 15 minutes, we're already exceptionally weird. An alien takes control of his body and he's returned to Earth, where he wanders around Cape Town being fed drugs and trying to interact with humans, but not doing a very good job of it. He has a sexual encounter that results in an instantaneous baby being born, but also heals a man. It's essentially just a series of odd encounters with the darker side of the city as he tries to process it all from an alien perspective, and it's definitely strange. And this one is from Ryan Kruger, who was known as a pretty innovative music video director noted for his bizarre visual stylings. And he also did some small acting gigs from time to time. Even though he had shot a large number of music videos and short films, this was his first feature. It was adapted from a short that he did with the same name and was shot in a very different style. There wasn't a script and only a scene breakdown existed, and they would develop the dialogue and scene structure while on set filming, making for a very improvisational feeling for the project. It played a bunch of festivals and won a number of awards before being picked up by Shudder for distribution and release in the US. And trust me, this one is very strange and even has an intermission in there for some reason. And Gary Green as Barry is just wild with his mannerisms. And it gets pretty intense and violent at times, and chainsaws are involved, but it also has a sentimental side. This is one that I know some people haven't enjoyed, and mainly because there's not a ton of story and it does ramble a bit, but I really like it. It has a surprising amount of heart at times. Kruger has a new film coming out, and it's a remake of the Melt movie, Street Trash. And seeing this film, I think he's the right one to take it on. So we'll see if he does some justice to the old Tenafly Viper.
Come here. Dippy against soldiers, your favorite.
I want Milky Milk.
No Milky Milk. Dippy against soldiers. That's it.
Milky Milk.
Number 1. Here we go, our most insane movie, our number 1, and it's House. But not the William Katt one. This is the Japanese film some call Hausu from 1977. And I think this is a little more known, and it has a lot of recognition, but it still seems like not a lot of people have seen it. We meet a girl named Gorgeous and her friend Fantasy, two very average and common Japanese names. And it's about to be summer break. Gorgeous's dad is back from a business trip, and he reveals that he's getting remarried to Ryoko here. And Gorge isn't happy. And I should mention that the movie keeps doing these little oddball editing things here and there. Her friends, who are Fantasy, Prof, Melody, Kung Fu, Mac, and Sweet, are all going on a trip together up to Gorgeous's aunt's house. The house is apparently in a Mentos commercial. And for real, look how kooky this all is. There's watermelons, and Auntie is kind of spooky and has this big old fluffy cat. And they go into the house, and this happens. But then things get even wackier, with severed heads that fly around and bite butts, mouth eyeballs, flying logs, and I swear this girl is going to start playing Black Parade. And I am telling you that the insanity just does not let up. Like, there's crazy stuff in the mirror, and just when you're like, well, there's no way for this to get weirder, then the movie just turns around and cranks the dial to 173. And the girls are then trapped in the house, and bad things start to happen. And notice I didn't say insane things, because those started a long while ago. But yeah, pianos start chomping on people for some reason through a fishbowl. And this is from Nobuhiko Obayashi. And how's this for crazy? His first film on IMDb is listed as being from 1944. He was born in 1938. He made his first film, an animated short, at 6 years old. Stella, you're a year behind. Get shooting. And what's really nuts about this one is that it was, I guess, Japan's answer to Jaws. Yes, this. Toho saw how successful that was and approached the filmmaker to do something similar. And Obayashi talked this over with his young daughter, as you do, and she suggested some of the more surreal imagery depicted here. At this point, he was only meant to write the film, but when he turned it in, no directors wanted to touch it, saying that it would end their careers. So he had to do the job himself. Toho was worried about it because they thought it was just too odd, and the reviews weren't great, but the movie was a big hit, and eventually, after like 2 decades, got an official release in the US and has since become a major cult sensation. And if you haven't seen this one, I don't know what to say except that you have one hell of an experience ahead of you. So there you have it, 10 more really weird, insane horror movies, or horror adjacent, I guess, because some of these are probably marginally horror. But yeah, I went with a mix of things that you may have seen or may not have seen. Let me know which of these you have. Let me know which one of these you may now want to see, because there's definitely the majority of these were actually pretty fun and watchable. There's not many of these that I was like, I hated watching this. This was miserable. Even some of the more like not good ones were still fun and strange to watch. So I enjoyed them. If you liked this video, hit that like button. If you enjoy the channel, hit subscribe and hit the little bell to get notified when new videos come out. And if you want to help support the channel, you can go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. I certainly would appreciate that. And otherwise, just keep on coming back and watching. And I'll see you very shortly for another great video. Thanks, guys, and bye-bye.